Hey PC gamers, and welcome back to the PC Gamer Chat Log. I'm Lauren Morton.
And hey everyone, I'm Mollie Taylor.
And this week, Mollie and I are talking to Jacob Ridley, who is one of our hardware folks, about custom mechanical keyboards and building them, which is a thing that neither of us have embarked on yet, but have been very enticed by. You know, you see those videos come across your social feeds of very aesthetic or very cool sounding mechanical keyboards, and it's really tempting. You're like, I want one of those. So we are pulling in Jacob to help us dissect what you might need to know to kind of get started, and also just his own personal experiences, because he has done a bit of keyboard construction himself pretty recently. So hopefully he doesn't scare us off the whole prospect of doing it. But before we get to that, Mollie, what did you play last week?
Yeah, so I tried to play many things. Really did try to play many things, and yet all I did play was Balatro.
Yes.
I am poker pilled officially. Like, I have severe Balatro brain rot. It's so good. I can't get over how good it is. I'm like 25-ish hours played now, which still isn't like, it's not a lot. It's enough.
But that is a lot.
It's enough for it to be like, wow, for me personally. It's the most I've ever played a roguelike. My favorite thing has been slowly indoctrinating everyone else on the team to start playing Balatro.
There are several people into it now. Like,
there are several Balatro enjoyers on the team. Our editor-in-chief, Evan, he picked up the game over the weekend. Staff writer Harvey Randall, who was on the podcast recently, he picked it up last week. My favorite thing about the weekend was, because I'm not normally home on a weekend, but I was at home this weekend. So my favorite thing was sitting at my PC and just seeing how many times Evan and Harvey were like going on to Balatro. Like every hour, one of them was booting the game up and playing it. It's that game that you'll play it and you'll be like, okay, I'm done with it for now. And you'll quit out of it. And then you'll like find something else to play and you'll just end up playing Balatro again. Like, it's so good. Even if you don't like poker, even if you don't know poker, because I don't know poker. I have no concept of poker. I have no concept of roguelikes. But Balatro's so good. Number go big, make brain, feel good. Yeah.
Beautiful. It really is having a moment on the team right now. Truly.
I think Balatro and Helldivers are probably like a team, like a PC gamer favorite of the moment. It's the PC gamer flavors of the month right now, I think. Balatro and Helldivers. I have not been playing Helldivers, but I have been playing a lot of Balatro. So those, it's been a good week. It's been a good week of playing bastardized poker hands to get millions of points. So yeah, that was my week in gaming. How about you, Lauren? What did you get up to?
I tried Garden Life: a cozy simulator, which is a bit of a mouthful of a name, if we're being honest. I wish I had something a little bit more catchy, but that came out last week, and so I tried only a little bit of it so far. I need to mess with the field of view settings, because certain first-person games will like really mess with me. Like, do you get motion sickness from first-person games ever?
Yes. I've got like a very weak stomach. Like, sitting on a bus makes me feel like I'm going to vomit. So like having to look at video games with certain field of views or motion, but
yeah, and it's like, it's not even just like a nauseated feeling. If I'm like struggling with a game, like my vision starts getting blurry, like I get cold sweats, like I'm having like a
vertigo type situation,
like a whole fever reaction. So anyway, it wasn't that bad, but I was like, you need to be careful with this. It feels like one of those games that you need to like pay really close attention to the field of view so that it doesn't make you sick. But anyway, that has nothing to do with the game itself. It's very pretty. It's first person walking around this garden. You are like tending to it, like you start with a very small area, and you're sort of being walked through the tutorial. And actually the first thing that I really enjoyed was you plant like some rose bushes, some daffodils. You're like watching them grow, and then you're supposed to take cuttings, and those are things that you're like delivering to people as requests. They like need certain flower cuttings that they want. And the system for taking cuttings off of flowers and bushes is actually very detailed. It has like, you pull out your like little shears, and it has this plane that it's showing you, and it'll snap to like a bunch of individual sprigs of this rose bush. Like any sprig on it, you could cut here, 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 here. So it's very like, and then it chops off like that part of the rose bush. It's very detailed, actually.
That's so cool.
And I liked that a lot because I'm a notorious over pruner in my own real life. And so I was like, now don't cut this rose bush back too far. You be careful. You know how you get when you get those shears in your hands. So I need to play more of it. It's very cute. I've only played like 30 minutes. Honestly, I got through the tutorial and then I was like, be careful, don't make yourself sick. So I walked away from that. And I guess sort of along the same lines, I picked up Nightingale and started playing that with my usual crafting co-op friends. And that is also in first person. And they have an experimental setting for third person that I turned on immediately because I was like, we're just not even going to attempt fate. Just put it in third person. So I've been playing that way. Enjoying the fashion, enjoying the setting. It's definitely very pretty. There's like some small complaints that we've had with the way that like the crafting and building and like progression systems work. Like you have to buy recipes for crafting tables, and you don't like, because we're playing in co-op, my friend bought a bunch of crafting tables, built them, put them down. I can't use them because I don't know the recipes for the things to make on it. And you get the recipes for the things to make at the table by buying the recipe for the table. And so I had to go do that before I could even like use the stations. And then to buy recipes, you're like using essence, which you're meant to be going out and like doing some puzzles, like fighting some things, doing whatever, and you get essence that way. But you can also like break down things in your inventory, like crafting materials. Like you've got a bunch of fiber on you from like picking up like whatever, and you can break that down into essence. And it's not the intended way to play, but I think it's very easy to be a player and wind up at this trader and be like, I need these 6 recipes. I don't have a ton of essence on me. I'm going to strip this entire area of fiber. I'm just going to pick every bush in the area, every single one. I'm going to get 500 fiber and break it all down into essence so that I can afford to buy these crafting tables. And like, that's not what they wanted you to do. They wanted you to like go have fun, do some challenges, but it's very easy to like wind up doing that because that feels like the most efficient thing to do at that moment, which is a bummer. So just like little complaints, and some of them have to do with just like the way we're playing, and some of them are ways that it feels like it's encouraging us to play, and like, you know, whatever.
Like I, as Gilly as child, I did not get through the tutorial. I think the tutorial has been a bit of a complaint as well in the way that it's delivered. Multiply that with my ever growing hatred for tutorials, which is very well documented at this point. But I will say I did like the fashion even in the character creation, and like the difficulty that you set the game to affects your backstory, which affects your clothes, which I thought was really cool. So like if the game is easier, you're from like a backstory that more closely matches like your role, right? And if it's harder, it's like, I forget the role that I picked, but on the hardest difficulty, it was basically, I think I picked like tradesperson. And then the hardest difficulty was that I was like a clueless aristocrat basically, that like aristocrat. I'm like a clueless aristocrat that has like, that sort of vaguely has some semblance of idea of how to do it, but I really liked that kind of element to it. I thought that was really cool, and I had a pretty dress if I picked the hardest difficulty, which was cool.
I, because of who I'm playing with and just because of how our weekend went, I got to hear like 3 of my friends and my partner go through the tutorial individually, like before we started playing together. Like we're in a call together, and hilariously, like I think it's the second part of the tutorials where it sends you to a desert and it's like introducing you to the idea of being too hot and you need to find shade, and that meter it's like warning you that you're hot. It starts filling up very fast and you're just dropped in the middle of this desert. So we now have like referred to it as like the, oh God, I'm hot part of the tutorial, because every time we hear one of us like jump into that, they're like, oh God, I'm hot. And then there's like, what do I do? And we're like, oh yes, that's that part of the tutorial. I remember that. Very, amazing. Very memorable. So yeah, that is what I did last week. And then, without too much further ado, let's go grab Jacob to talk about keyboards. Hey Jacob, thank you for joining us as one of our like resident keyboard experts. I mean, hardware stuff. Jacob, you are a hardware person, but we're bringing you here today to talk about keyboards and keyboard obsession.
Yeah, thanks for having me on to talk about one of my favorite things. So yeah, it's going to be easy to talk about keyboards for a while. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so first things first is who in the room actually has done this, actually has a custom mechanical keyboard? I already know the answer, but...
Yeah, don't look at me.
It's you, Jacob. You're the one.
Well, so I actually only very recently built one from scratch, but I have what I have are the constituent parts of many keyboards I've had for probably like a decade or so and been building up. Most of it's behind me if anyone is watching on a video. But actually, I've been customizing pre-made boards a lot more than I've made one, and now I've had the experience of actually kind of making one from the ground up, yet with a kit as well. So yeah, there's a few ways you can go about it. There's a lot you can talk about when it comes to gaming keyboards, whether you start from the switches or go all the way down.
You wrote about, or you did a review for the Ducky Project D, and I saw the TikTok video also that you produced for that in that article, and it made me afraid, and now I'm more scared than I was.
I'm glad you watched that video. I spent ages building that keyboard for that, and I was like, oh damn, only like a couple of people watched it. But yeah, it was I would say that was actually it's very straightforward process. If you're somebody who can just doesn't struggle to read an instruction manual, that's just very straightforward, just step by step. Actually, I thought that was a really easy way to get into building a keyboard, and the keyboard that came out at the end is a weapon. I would say, like it's so heavy. It's honestly a weapon.
That's terrifying.
Like I didn't Lego kit. Is that what it was like?
I'd say, thing is, people say stuff like a Lego kit for about every single piece of hardware or building a PC. And I know a lot of people that have like a real issue with that, but I would say yes, it is quite like a Lego. I'd say it's easier than a Lego kit. There are way less parts. But what puts you off the idea then, Mollie, of building your own keyboard?
I'm stupid.
No, Mollie, stop.
Like, I don't know what I want, I think is the biggest thing that puts me off having to like go out of my way to pick like individual pieces. The only thing that I know is I like a good 100% keyboard. I like a good full keyboard. I love my numpad. I will take a TKL. I prefer like a full keyboard. That's all I know. You're going to ask me about switches, anything like that, immediately I have no idea.
I totally agree with you on the full size thing though. I want a numpad. I'm a real numpad kind of guy. I want to tip tap on that. But as soon as you get rid of it, I just feel like I've completely lost. I just can't input numbers quickly, which I really care about because I'm a big nerd, I guess.
I went down to a 10 keyless board. That's what I have now, and because I don't use the numpad. Except for because we're all writers in the room, what do we use the numpad for? The Windows code key for the M dash. That's what we all know. It's Alt 0151, is it not? I haven't used it in years because I'm on a 10 keyless board and I'm sad, but I miss it because I can't M dash quickly.
Yeah, I think I've got a 60% keyboard now, and that is too small for me. I mean, I'm reviewing it. It's this Asus ROG. Oh, I'm gonna forget the name. Falchion. It's a terrible name. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna put that out on the pod already before I review it. It's a terrible name, but it's 60%, and you have to really kind of know your shortcuts and know how the function keys work and set it up to your own taste and your own preference to really get the most out of it. And I'm just a bit lazy, and I just don't really want to do that. I'd rather just have a full size keyboard.
You don't have a print screen you don't have a print screen key at that size, do you? There's no way you do.
It does have one. It's a function. You press a function, then you press another button.
So it doesn't have a print screen key, Jacob.
No, it doesn't. No, okay, yeah. But what it does have is like
keys?
page. Yeah, it has arrow keys, yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't have, you have insert, delete, page up, page down, arrow keys, and then you just have kind of the standard bulk of keys.
That was the other thing that was a shock to me. That I went down to a smaller keyboard. I was like, what about the print screen key? That's the thing that I'm so used to. And I had to like redo my freaking GeForce Replay hotkeys to be on like my page up and page down for my clips and my screenshots. What life is really difficult.
And then you find out normally after doing that some other app or some other function has been using that shortcut for ages, and you just had no idea.
It is, it's pain. Lauren, I can't believe you don't use a full keyboard as an MMO gamer. What the hell?
What do I need a numpad for?
Everything. Like, the numpad is my best friend in MMOs. Like, then I have everything on a numpad, like bound to stuff, like my mounts, my shortcuts, my macros. You don't have any of that in your Guild Wars?
Hold on, I need to take a page from your book. I'm stupid, and I'm a casual MMO player.
You're not macroing at all.
No, not at all. Apparently,
We've talked about macro as well.
We've talked about mice before, and Mollie has like a really legit MMO mouse, and I'm like, no, I am not dexterous enough. Mine has 2 buttons. I could not possibly have more than that.
I like 2 buttons. I use some which have more buttons. I know we're going off topic, but I use some with more buttons. It's too much. I can't be dealing with that.
The more buttons, the better, is how I feel about all my peripherals.
Yeah, that's a good way to be.
So this desire for a big keyboard is part of what is making me enticed by the custom keyboard phenomenon, because I feel like I spend too much time on TikTok. I think that might describe all 3 of us. Jacob, I don't know about you. You must.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, I do, yeah.
Yeah.
And I get served these videos of like the beautiful, the cozy girl gaming setups, and they've all got these adorable 60% keyboards, and they pull out the USB-C and they open up their thing and they pull out another keyboard and they're like, here's the new one. They plug that in and they make these tiny little beautiful sounds. They don't make horrible ancient clickety clacks. They make little bloop 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 bloop, bloop noises. I'm like, I want to swap keyboards. I want to be yeah.
I think it's with those videos, I always find it's always the sound that's quite alert. Yeah. It's the clack, and like they always get the sound really perfect. And every time I've tried to like imitate that, it's always fallen through.
When you start doing ASMR, Jacob? ASMR keyboards.
Well, it could come to the PC Gamer TikTok very soon if everyone's on board.
I would be for it.
Yeah. I would just say that the actual fundamental thing, though, that like, especially with those kind of ASMR keyboard, I don't know if we want to call them ASMR keyboard videos, but
the people who make them do. So
yeah, I guess they are. Yeah, yeah, I suppose so. But it's all about the switches in that. And if you're not paying attention to what the switches are and you don't want to know about the switches, that you're never going to get the exact right sound and feel that you actually want. And I think that's kind of the fundamental. You can have a keyboard with RGB, you can have it with like keycaps, you can have it look like exactly how you want it, which everyone super wants to do. But I think really it comes down to your choice of key switch. Right. And there are a lot of them.
That's what this is what I wanted to ask, right? There's a lot of switches. I know we have like a guide to all the different switches. There are like 15, 20. There are so I know some are like dupes, right? But
there's a lot more than 15, 20, Mollie. There's a lot more than that.
There's just as many as people want to invent. People just keep making up switches and naming them.
That guide you're speaking about, I actually updated that after somebody did the work way before I even worked here, which was great because they did the bulk of the work on the really common switches. I went through and added a few more that have existed since then. But I mean, it is a drop in the ocean, because you can have not only like the major brands where you get like Cherry, Kale, Carl, I'm not sure how you actually say that brand, Gatoron. These are all like people that make switches that you'll find in like a lot of different keyboards. And they'll all tend to have the same kind of archetypes for switches, which is linear, tactile, or clicky. And all switches really fall into one of those 3. Well, I say all, I'm sure there are some which are weird and don't do that. But you can get, I mean, outside of those brands, or even within those brands, you can get so many other types of keys. There are ones specifically for gaming, which have faster actuation points, which means, it's just going to register the key press quicker. So there's just so much and everyone's got a different preference. I mean, anyone on the hardware team has a very specific type of key that they prefer.
What's your preference then, Jacob?
Clicky switches are where I'm at. They're the loudest, so they're the most obnoxious, especially if you're working in an office environment, which I have one of the loudest clicky switches in the office. Like, known to man. It's amazing. If you couple of clacks on that and everyone's looking, there's like 50 people on one floor. But my personal one is clicky, which I think is quite popular, but a lot of people maybe find annoying. And it's definitely annoying if you are on Discord calls a lot, because it gets picked up. I don't know if you guys have any experience with like linear, tactile, clicky, or if you have a preference between those three.
That's a good question. So I had to actually Google what switches my current keyboard is. I've got linear switches, which I did not know. I did not realize I had linear. I've got the Razer Huntsman TKL right now, which has linear switches. I forget what it is beyond that.
I think they're Razer's own creation in those. I can't remember who actually makes those switches, but there would be Razer branded ones.
Yes, it's the Razer branded switches, and then before that I had what were they called? Like optomechanical. It was something like that on my previous Huntsman.
Yeah, so I think optical's really interesting, because you can do stuff like adjustable actuations with. This is going to get so into the weeds so quick. We're already into it now with switches. Let's get into it. So you have a mechanical switch which has like a little leaf in it, right? And it rubs against it, and that creates a connection. So when you press the key down, whether it's tactile, have a little like kind of, it'll cause a little bump, but it won't be loud. A clicky switch actually like makes a loud click, and linear just doesn't have that. It just goes down, bottoms out, comes back. And where it actuates is where the two like leaves of the metal contact each other. Where that is and how that changes and that changes how the switch kind of actuates and how it feels. So that's how you get all the different types. Optomechanical, it's a bit of a weird. No, I just call them optical. Is I guess the normal way of saying it. Instead of using the actual leaf, the two leaves kind of metal bits to connect to create the contact, send a signal, they'll use like light, but breaking light. So when you press it down, it'll either break or some kind of light signal, and then that goes through, and it could be quicker response time than you might get with a mechanical one. Some people did some really interesting stuff, like Wooting back in the day with their first generation analog keyboard. They were using light in a very clever way to create adjustable actuations, where you can go into the software, you press the switch down, and where it actuates the switch it registers a key press, depends on where you set it in the software. It doesn't matter, because there isn't, it's about the light that's in the switch. It doesn't matter. It's not like a metal contact that is physically there. And then since then, you've kind of seen optical switches give way to Hall effect switches, which use magnets to sense the distance that a key press. And then you get really cool stuff like being able to do a fully analog. You could do this actually with optical switches, but people have moved away from that now. You use it to where if you depress the key, instead of being on or off, you can have it so that when you press the key down, it registers the whole movement as independent movements. So you can set it as like X input for a game, and then you can use WASD like you would an analog stick, and you can move around. You could walk, in Red Dead or something. You can walk slowly and then run fast. It takes ages to get used to it though, and a lot of the time you can set them into instead where halfway down is one press and full way down is another press. So you have multi-functions depending on how hard you press them. So you get cool stuff like that with analog switches. But then you can't do that in a custom keyboard, because you need a PCB that supports it. You need all this. It's completely different. So if you're thinking of building one, don't think about building an analog one or building one with Hall effect switches. As far as I know, I don't think you can just buy a PCB for that, but maybe you can actually. Maybe you can.
This is what happens is I get like a little bit interested in something like this, and then all of a sudden I'm way too deep. This is why I asked you to come on and talk to us about it, Jacob, is because I think it was like a couple weeks ago in the work chat where I was like, I had seen one of these freaking TikTok videos and I wanted one of these keyboards because I am susceptible. And I think they have I think they do tactile switches usually, the people with these like cute little thocky sounding keys. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna start looking at what switches are. I'm gonna look at our guide and like try to understand the basics of what Jacob just described of like, how the mechanics of the switch actually work. And then all of a sudden I'm in like 3 different storefronts, like a couple different Amazon listings, looking at like not just glorious panda switches, but like Princess Matcha key. I couldn't even name them. They have like all these wild names.
Well, those glorious Panda switches, they came out of what used to be called a Holy Panda, which was two different switches that people used to, they were both group buys, and I think you could get one of them. They then, somebody else made one, it's called like Halo Trues, I think they used to use, but it was something before that even. Anyways, I won't go into the full lore of it because then we could be here all day. But they basically combine, they take the switches apart and combine one bit from one, like the spring and stem from one, and then the casing of the other, and they'd lube them up, and then they put that together, and then that was the like legendary best switch ever made. I think nowadays you could probably buy a lot of really nice switches that are probably equally as good. I think, although I say that I've not actually used Holy Pandas, like genuine Holy Pandas. So, but yeah, like you say, they have a lot of silly names, and a lot of them come with a lot of weird lore, which is odd for something like that.
Of all things, to have like this deep, like weirdly combinational lore. Yeah, it is not even the keys. We haven't even gotten to keys yet. We're just talking about the switches, the inside, the
That's
thing.
What I'm saying. It's the most important bit.
Yeah,
it is the most important bit.
Oh no, I fully believe you. And so I guess like we're just like assuming even still a certain amount of knowledge. But if you have your mechanical keyboard and you like, oh gosh, I just pressed F1 on accident. Where did our recording go? Hello, I'm still here. If you rip your key off, if you have one where you can change the keycaps, the like little minor cherry switches, I'm pretty sure in my SteelSeries keyboard, it's like, the little crossbar thing, and it's what is actually the keyboard key before you put the cap on top of it of what it looks like. And that's what we're talking about, is you can change those in and out. Some keyboards are hot swappable, where you can get new switches, pull them out, put the new ones in before you even get to talking about getting new keycaps and pulling those off and putting new ones of those on.
Well, this is the thing that's why switches are so important, because even the keycaps, which you're talking about as customization, that which keycaps you can get depend on which switches you have, because the stems, like you're saying, you have MX stems, like cherry stems, which is just the cross. That's the most popular kind of, design for the stem. But you can get all sorts of different ones. Low profile switches tend to use completely different stems. So yeah, you can be really stuck if you have a keyboard which has kind of weirder switches. You might not be able to get cool, fun keycaps or artisanal keycaps to stick on them. And also, like you say, if you'll probably have to solder switches to most boards when you're building them, unless you get one that can do hot swappable, which has become a really big trend in the last few years. It was probably a bigger trend before in the actual like custom mechanical world, where people were really putting a lot of effort into building their own boards. Whereas I think now we're seeing like major manufacturers release hot swappable boards as well. And I think maybe that's because the price of the actual PCB that you need, the circuit board that you need to offer hot swappable switches, is coming down. I imagine it must be cheaper to offer that nowadays. And it's really simple, and I love it. So
yeah, I think Wes also wrote about having a hot swappable keyboard, Wes Fenlon, on the site. And like becoming obsessed with it. I don't remember. I probably read it a while ago, but I forget what exactly he went into in that one. Did you read it, Mollie?
I have not read it.
I think he was talking about 3-pin and 5-pin switches in that as well. Okay. I remember that loosely. I remember reading it at the time, but it was a while back.
He did say this in the work chat when we were bringing up keyboards. He said he had to like file off a bunch of pins because he had 5-pin switches but a 3-pin board, so he had to just like cut off the extra 2 pins so he could fit them all into the keyboard, and it was a nightmare.
This is what puts people off, though, isn't it? It's like you're having the same. Every time you uncover a little bit about, I'm not saying put people off in a bad way, but this is the ultimate you have to figure out all these little things, compatibility with all these different things, to try and build your own board from scratch, that I think a lot of people just go, I will just buy one, and then maybe put some nice keycaps on it, which I think is a completely valid way to customize your board and make it for a nice desktop.
Yeah. I guess sort of along those lines then, it reminds me of when I was younger and first learning how to build a PC. And it's the same thing where, as you say, like in hardware, people say stuff like, it's just like Legos. And you're like, okay, but like not always. It's not. But if you're just starting to get into something like this, if you're just getting into learning how to build a PC, you might start with swapping your RAM out. You are, 14, 15 years old, and you're like, okay, I can swap the RAM out. That really is just, you take it out and you shove a new one in. And there are some considerations to make sure you get stuff that's like compatible with your board, but really swapping the RAM is not that scary. You can do that. And once you're comfortable with that, you might try swapping out a GPU because it's not that much more difficult. They also kind of just plug in, you just shove it in there and it's okay. So like what is sort of that entry point like equivalent for a keyboard? Should you get something that has a certain type of keycap or switch already installed with the knowledge that you could switch the keycaps and like you start there? Or should you get yourself a hot swappable board and like leave that option open to yourself if you're curious?
I think because the affordability of just like a cherry mechanical keyboard, because I think we didn't even touch on the fact that you could have like a membrane keyboard that doesn't have mechanical switches whatsoever,
Right, yeah.
and that's a whole other thing. So we're saying, right, you want to get in a mechanical keyboard. I think you could get a really nice cherry keyboard with cherry switches, and you'd be able to just get that. It'd work great. It'd be really good for gaming, and you'd be able to swap the keycaps at some point. I think swapping keycaps is probably the easiest thing you could do. Maybe buying like an artisan keycap or like, a fun custom keycap, which is probably my like true flame really. I absolutely love artisan keycaps. Those are like the best bit. But I think that's like the simplest thing but as I'm saying this, I'm kind of thinking, but that means you need to look into the sizing of keycaps, which is a whole world of pain. I'm going to be honest. I think when I was looking into like buying keycaps the first few times, I didn't really have a full grasp of the layouts and the sizing of keys. So each key, like each regular key, is like called 1U, and everything beyond that is like that multiplied. So like most switches, I think like 1.25, 1.5U, and then the spacebar is like 625 or 650, and so they're just like, most keyboards will use 1U as the standard generic switch, to keycaps. And then you'll have probably standard Control Alt Windows key, depending on whether you're US, UK, where you'll have a different enter and a different shift size. That's the other thing. So you can quickly get into the weeds with it, but I think generally buying just a solid cherry keyboard, you're going to find the most compatibility to that cherry stem. You'll be able to just buy keycaps and load them up.
Start there.
Yeah.
This is why I'm saying I'm doubting myself already, because I did that back in the day. I had a Corsair keyboard, and the funny thing about Corsair keyboards, one of the first mechanical keyboards I kind of got, they have weird sizing, and they didn't really at the time. I don't know if they've changed. I don't think they have changed it. I think they still have weird sizing. So if you were to buy if you go on a group buy online, and you want to buy a bunch of keycaps, you might find that they don't actually fit at all for your Corsair keyboard, and so you should have bought some other specially designed ones. But I think for the most part, you could always swap out all of the 1U layer keys with something of your choosing. If you had like a white keyboard with standard switches, with standard keycaps, you could go, all right, I'm going to swap out all the letter keys for red or blue or pink or something like that. That'd be very easy to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you've said group buy a couple of times now. So maybe for the uninitiated, which is me, I'm the uninitiated, could you maybe explain like what a group buy is for like custom keyboards?
Yeah, I would say like group buys. So fundamentally, they are just a term for everyone signs up to buy something, and then the person selling the product just goes, I guess they don't have the stock at hand at that moment. They get all the interest. It's like registering your interest, and then they ship them all out to you in one big thing. And normally it's a huge deal in custom keyboards, because that's really the only way, I think, for a niche interest, which is growing massively now. It's the only way you can get people to like manufacture enough or get enough interest in this stuff to manufacture it to begin with. I don't think you can take a punt on making some really weird niche key switches and order 10,000 of them, and then probably more than that, realistically, probably a lot more than that. It's going to cost you a lot of money. It's a lot of risk.
So it's just the pre-order to gauge the amount of like the run needed to supply a certain amount of demand. Like if you go into Etsy and you're buying, doing like a pre-order for enamel pins, people that design enamel pins, people that design custom bags, you do the same type of thing. You sign up for the pre-order and then they run to production based on how many people got the pre-order, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And realistically, I think that's what's been a driving force behind a lot of custom keyboard kind of releases over the past, I mean, even probably 10 years, probably longer, really, longer than I've probably been doing it, because I think you couldn't really get all this stuff without doing group buys. And pretty much all the switches I own, I got through group buys. Some of them are more regular, where they kept repeating them. So there were some from Drop. It used to be Mass Drop, now Drop. Just got bought by Corsair, actually. They sell a lot of switches, but they'll repeatedly sell the same kind of switch as a part of a group buy, and they'll just do them in batches. And so they do some popular ones there. But some of the switches I have, I mean, I got them in a group buy. They were called Novel Keys, Novelias, were some of them back in the day, which I definitely should have bought. I didn't have the money for them at the time. They were like a one and done, So you get a lot of switches which are like, hey, here's some cool switches. We will never make these ever again, so you're going to be the only people that get them, which is what makes group buys quite alluring, I think. Has anyone here, number one, bought anything through a group buy, but has anyone like bought any key caps at all?
I bought one. One single.
Did you tell us about it? Like, did you post it in Slack or something? I feel like I remember you mentioning it, or am I a big fat liar?
No, and I don't know where it is, because literally all I got was like, I went on Etsy and I was like, I just want one little custom key, and it's gonna be a green creeper from Minecraft, and I'm gonna put it on my escape key. And I did get that, and then it did fit, and I was like, it is not aesthetically pleasing. I should not have done this. It doesn't make the purpose of my keyboard. So I had regret, but that is the only thing I have done up to date.
Artisan keys is definitely my absolute favorite thing. Sorry, Mollie, you haven't done it yourself.
I have not bought one, but I was looking at, someone put a website in our podcast notes for artisan keycaps, and I went and looked, and they had these like little pillow ones. They had this like checkerboard pillow, and I want it. I want it immediately.
I spoke to some people that made artisan keycaps, like this probably a couple of years ago. There's an article on PC Gamer that anyone wants to check out that can read. And it was really interesting, because some people do it as a hobby, making artisan keycaps, and they're just one person at home kind of with either a 3D printer or sometimes doing this resin. They're making them out of resin using molds. And they're incredible, the stuff they're doing. And then you've got companies who are really getting into this stuff as well. And they're doing like mass 3D printing, huge industrial scale, printing out. And I've always been really surprised by just like the quality overall, I think, of most artisan keycaps I've seen, like custom keycaps, has been really good. And I think they're just like a wonderful way to kind of make your keyboard. That's actually, I take it back. That's the easiest way to customize your keyboard. Because you can just get one of those, and like you say, you can smash it on the escape key. It'll probably fit. It'll probably be fine. Just check your stems are all compatible. You're good. You don't have to worry about sizing for the most part. I just thought of another thing that you do. There are things such as row profiles.
Oh yeah,
it's I'm going to get really into this straight away. Mollie is just kind of completely gone behind the eyes. I forgot about it. But basically, if you look at a keyboard kind of long ways, you can see, there's a stepping to the keys, and most keyboards use a similar stepping, and it does escape me the exact one they use, but not all keyboards, and some of them will use completely flat stepping, which is, I think, called DSA. And so generally, you just want to make sure that your keyboard that you're buying an artisan key that's made to the same row of where you want to put it on your keyboard, because it'll have a different angle, a different height, depending on which row in the keyboard it is. So your escape key is going to be one of the highest keys, the tallest keys, with like the certain angle to it.
I wish I could pick my keyboard all the way up, but it's when you look at it like long ways on like that, that you can see the shape.
I don't know if this will come through.
Yeah, kind of.
You can see this key. This is not going to be good for people.
Shape.
Yeah, I think this is just a standard cherry one. But actually, this is a prime example of what happens. I'm sorry for people who are actually listening to this podcast, not looking at it, but there is a key on this keyboard I'm showing, which is, I got a nice custom key, which is actually the right height for the row. And I had to make do with a rubbish key that actually shouldn't be here at all, and it's way lower because this key should be down on this row. And so in this case, the artisan keys actually worked out quite well. But the other keys I had to steal off a different keyboard and put on there did not. And that is the risk you run with doing any of this custom keyboard stuff. So I would recommend people learn getting a bit confident with just at least recognizing what profile they have and just double checking what keys they need in theory.
I've unlocked a memory of like one of the years of Black Friday, Jacob. I was on TikTok and found, and it's like something I just like threw into chat like a grenade, was this awful custom Kirby keyboard that somebody had made where all of the keys were the shape of Kirby's mouth open, and you had to put your fingers on Kirby's open mouth.
I remember this.
You probably do, because it like full Black Friday madness where you're just like, this is hilarious, and then 5 days later you're like, oh my god.
People should make more cursed keyboards, I think. Maybe that should be my next project. Yeah.
Doesn't Routing have the Uwu? I say keyboard. I don't think you could call it a keyboard because it's like 5 keys.
Yeah, is it? Maybe it is Wooting. I can't remember who it was who made that one, but yeah, it's for a specific beat, like a game,
it's
a
for
rhythm game,
I
right?
think, right?
Yeah. But that's really cool. That's like a genuinely cool use for a custom designed keyboard, right? Where they've gone out and they're appealing to. I think it is a big rhythm game, but it's still like a niche audience, really, in the grand scheme of keyboards. To be like, we're going to make this very tiny 3-key, 5-key keyboard. But I love that kind of stuff. That's some of the best bits.
One thing I found out about as I was like, again, getting into the weeds and getting too deep for my level of knowledge on this was that you can get sometimes a like little tester block that has a bunch of switches on it, and you can test what they all feel like. It'll be a 5x5 square, all with different switches on it to see what they feel like. Do you have one right next to you?
I was literally just looking. I do have one somewhere. Yeah, actually, I don't have one with. I actually don't have the switcher board with me right now, but I do have like rows and rows of switches where I have all the different ones in it. So it would be great
something like that. I don't know
what
I want.
Yeah, that's the thing. You want to be able to go to a shop, your local custom keyboard shop, I guess, and you want to be able to walk in and just have all the keys there, and you can just press a bunch. Yeah. But I used to have one that was a grid, and it's kind of, I don't know, 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters, and it was just filled with switches, and you could add some of your own in there as well, which is really nerdy, but it was really cool because you could just sit there all day and it's like a little fidget toy. You're just pressing all the different ones, and it's generally I used to have it in the office, and I used to just have it next to my keyboard and I just press them all day. But Dave James, the managing editor of Hardware now, his job title has just changed, but he has a little key ring, which is just a key switch, and you can just tap it with a little keycap on it. So he can just like walk around, just fidget toy basically of just a little key switch. And I think that's a great way to use, especially if you have a spare switch handy and you like fidgeting a lot, then it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That sounds so satisfying.
It does. Do you know what I really want to ask about? I saw you write the phrase lubing switches. And I had to read Dave's article on the fact that he lubed his switches, and I saw a picture, and I never want to do that. Have you lubed your switches, Jacob?
I've not personally lubed my switches. I've lubed the so on that keyboard I just picked up before, I've lubed all the stabilizers on that, which for the space bar and the enter key on a UK layout and shift key sometimes have one. It's the bits that kind of, because you only have one switch in them still, so on either side you still have like a bar, normally a metal bar, or you have little cherry stems. That's another thing you have to think about when you're buying keycaps. Anyways, that bit you can lube that so when it doesn't rattle around so much when you press it. So I've done that. I've got a little pot of lube. I've got a little paintbrush, and I sat there just lubing up these little stabilizers, and I thought,
how did that make you feel?
I'm not. I don't know. I was a bit like. I think I would lube a whole keyboard if I could, because I have a lubed keyboard. I actually have two that have been pre-lubed, And the difference is really
That's
good.
the thing you'll see on the product listings for Switches. A lot of them are pre-lubed.
It does make a difference. I swear, anyone listening who thinks that's just rubbish, it is not. The best gaming keyboard I've used in a couple of years now is the Asus ROG Strix Scope 296 wireless, and I'm very good at recalling that name from memory. And that's got lube switches, and the typing experience on it is just lovely. It really makes a huge difference, and it makes that sound as well. You know, Lauren, you were talking about the sound on those ASMR TikToks. Lubing switches is one way to really get that nice, like, kind of chunky thwack out of every single hit. It's definitely good. So I don't know why you guys are opposed to lubing switches.
Dave described it as a harrowing experience, didn't he, Mollie?
He did.
Yeah.
He described it as a harrowing and a shameful experience, I think was a way that he explained it.
Well, I guess he's doing it. So this is the thing, though. Lubing like 6 stabilizers or whatever is fine. Lubing 107 switches where you have to, or 106 switches or whatever, where you have to take the casing out using a little tool that pops them apart. And then you open them up, they have a spring, and you have the stem, you lube in there, and then you have to put them back together again, and then you move on to the next one. I mean, if it takes you, I don't know, like a minute per switch, you're still there like for, well, you're like nearly 2 hours. You're probably
3 hours.
2, 3 hours. Yeah, exactly. You could be there a long time just lubing switches. And at the end of it, you're really going to feel like that proud of yourself. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a lot of hours. I feel like I do care about like the overall feel of a keyboard, right? Especially with the work that we do, we spend so long like using a keyboard day to day, right? So I do care about how my switches feel, like how each, like, you know, kind of keystroke feels. I don't think I would notice the difference. I don't know.
I think you would. This is what I'm saying.
I'm an amateur.
This is what I'd say to you, though, Mollie. I think you should try a keyboard that, if you ever come to the office, we've got some keyboards. I'll let you take one that you like the most, and you can try that as a comparison. Because I think if you got the right switch, and you're like, okay, I've only had linear, which isn't, I would say, is not like the best for typing on. It's fine for typing on. It's just like the standard. But clicky and tactile have like that extra little bit of, like, they feel really nice to type on. So you get that. And then if I said, right, okay, here's a lubed version of that, so I think you would say it's better. I think you're used to the basic mechanical keyboard. I'm not calling you basic.
No,
I'm just saying I think you're used to it.
My keyboards.
Yeah, I think you quickly realize that actually, okay, some of these are really better.
Maybe I should, because I had to give up my old Razer Huntsman, my full keyboard, because I was like dropping inputs in my rhythm games and stuff. Like, it was either like doubling up on inputs or it was dropping inputs. I cleaned my keyboard, it was still doing it. So I was like, so now I'm down to the TKL, I'm down to the linear, and I don't know, yeah, like, it just, I don't feel satisfied when I'm typing. You know, I want to feel satisfied.
I think like a good mechanical keyboard won't, like, you, if you can set the actuation on some of them as well, but even ones where they just have a really rapid actuation, you won't mistype so much. You also won't get stuff where it just doesn't pick it up at all. Some keyboards let you do like an actuation. Normally they're something from about 4 millimeters to about 4 millimeters. I think some maybe do 0.2 millimeters, sorry. So 4 to 0.2 maybe is probably the range. Most switches as standard are kind of 1.2 to 2 millimeters. So it means the switch goes down 2 millimeters before it registers a click, a key press. Some of them then, so the 1.2 is like the gaming ones. You can set some of these like analog switches, so the Hall effect ones, to be 0.4, 0.2. That means like you barely touch this switch and it starts sending signals out. So I've had that set for gaming, because in theory that's the best option for gaming. It's super rapid, super responsive. But as soon as you try and type on that, it's an absolute nightmare. You're just mistyping all the time. And you realize how actually you rest your fingers on, especially if you're trying to do touch typing properly, you rest your fingers on a lot of the keys. That might set them off if you just rest your finger like to, a little bit there. So yeah, I think that's definitely, you have to pick the right keyboard, the right actuation, everything. But once you get there, I think you'll come to appreciate it.
Yeah, I think so.
So kind of the entry point, because really here I'm being selfish. All I want is to come out of this conversation and know like what I'm looking for when I go back to my shopping experience is you get there, you start looking at switches, you start looking at boards, you start looking at keycaps, and because of the internet world that we live in, there is it's a 50-word long product description. The like foundational words that you need to know as you're looking at switches are going to be what Jacob has been describing about, whether it's linear, tactile, or clicky. That's like the feeling of those switches as you're actually pressing them, and also has to do with how responsive they are. You need to worry about whether they're 3-pin or 5-pin if you think you're going to be switching them out, because that's like a compatibility issue with the board itself. And then you have, as Jacob also described, the stem shape, which is a lot of times that like cherry cross shape that you see when you take your key off, but some of them have other shapes, and that's for compatibility between the switch and the keycap. Is there another like piece of like that style of information that I'm missing when it comes to just the switches to start with?
So I think you have plates in keyboards. You have like a bottom plate and you have a top plate.
I haven't even heard about this.
And some switches, most switches come with the little clips where they can clip into a top plate, or they have the stems where they kind of lock into. So there are sometimes compatibility issues with those. But I think generally every single one I've ever used has used the same kind of top plate design where you kind of click the switch in and it slots in with the pins into the hot swappable PCB at the bottom. So you have a PCB, you have a top plate, and you just have cutouts in the top plate that allows you to load every switch into it. And like you say, I think apart from the Cherry MX stem, it used to have more like Logitech used to have their own keycap stem. It was really weird. They don't really use that anymore so much. So I think you're probably going to be pretty good with a Cherry MX stem, or that style, the cross stem.
And then for the keycaps themselves, the words and the terms to like look at in a shop, there's going to be the profile that you were describing, that like side on shape of whether they're all flat or whether they have this like sort of curving thing going on from row to row, because it means that each row of your keyboard is shaped slightly different. You can't just accidentally swap an F4 key and a letter key. They're different shapes because they fall in a different part of the keyboard ship, as it were. So you have to worry about the profile, and like the height of the rows. And then a couple things that I like didn't realize as I started looking was like the alignment of the letters and like the signatures, I think they're called, is like the proper term for that, is whether they're in the center of the key or somewhere else. I had never thought about that in my life, but mine are in the top left. Like the letters on the letter keys are all top left. My F keys, like the letters themselves, are in the center. They're centered. So that's a thing to think about because they're not all the same.
If you're getting rid of all of them,
sorry,
you don't have to.
See, you never think.
Yeah, they
about
are all
it.
different.
And
I
the
think
fonts. People use different fonts for keycaps too. So
I think it's quite difficult to like swap out one key with another. Like just one of the whole bunch. You almost have to swap out the whole bunch.
Right.
And in that case, then does it matter so much? But there are a few things I'd say with keycaps. There are two main types of plastic you get for keycaps. You get ABS and you get PBT. PBT is generally the preferred option because it's longer lasting. It doesn't get shiny when you use it over long periods. I don't know if you've ever used a keyboard for years and the keycap's going to get shiny and they wear down. That tends to be ABS. PBT is a bit like it's more grainier. It's like a texture.
Mine is PBT.
Okay. I know what you're talking about.
In the description. Yeah.
The other thing though is you get a lot of PBT keys don't have shine through. The lettering on them won't let you have a light behind them that shines through the lettering. So if you're backlighting, say RGB lighting, you'll want to make sure that your keys, they actually support that lighting up individual letters on every key, because otherwise they'll just shine out from behind, which is great, but won't actually help you see the keys at night. So I'd say those are two pretty big important bits. And you'll also realize that I think like really nice PBT keycap sets are very, very expensive. And that's kind of the big shame of all custom keyboard stuff.
And then as far as like basics where to go, Jacob, do you have, I know you said you've only built one thing actually from the ground up, but you've done other things. Are there particular either storefronts or brands that like you have personal experience with that you feel like are like a safe place to start for people?
Yeah, I've used Drop a fair few times for just kind of their like really standard key switches and some of their keycap sets. I've used novel keys for both keycaps and switches as well. I know Met Keys is a big brand. I haven't bought from them personally, but I know a lot of people that have and have good things to say about them. So yeah, I think there's Met Keys drop, novel keys. I'm sure that there are so many small bespoke kind of boutique keyboard sellers out there, so I don't want to do them an injustice by not calling them out, because I'm sure there are loads. I think just if it seems like too good to be true for a huge keyboard set or like a huge set of keycaps, I think the quality probably will. When they turn up, you'll probably notice that the quality isn't quite there. So I think just make sure you're trying to get some that has good reviews generally, as with everything.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I have gotten into the weeds once again.
I'm going to be researching.
Just deep enough to get into trouble, right?
I'm trying to save.
I'm so sorry, Mollie.
Yeah, I feel bad because you could so quickly go off on a tangent about any of these things, you know, like as soon as you get to the keycaps, you're like, okay, right, there's all this stuff you got to know about that. The switches, like you say, we barely touched on the kind of PCB and the top plate. If you really want to build one from scratch, you need there are certain sizing of the PCB that goes in and the top plate that goes into a casing, and then the casing can be, you know, different sizes, and then the feet, how it connects, the USB connection, whether you're going to solder the switches in or whether you're not. I mean, you can quickly get into the weeds with so much of this stuff. And you need, like, I don't know, maybe you should have a whole separate dedicated podcast just building keyboards.
Just building keyboards, a build along.
And we haven't even talked on the expensive cables, which I've never actually bought because they are too expensive, but they're really lovely. You know, the nice curly ones people always do.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Lauren knows
no.
exactly what you're on about, because all the
I know
TikTok girlies have them.
That's what they all have. Jacob, are you about to tell me this is like $100 cable or something?
Oh yeah, they're really expensive. I think
Why?
I'm sure you can get some cheaper than that, but you can sleeve your own though. That's the best thing. I actually know somebody who told me once that instead of buying them, they just got the stuff they needed to just start sleeving cables themselves. And they were like, well, as soon as you mess up like once, after that you can just sleeve all these cables. You get like a rubbish regular black plastic cable, and you just get some cool sleeving. And then you just like put it on, heat gun it, and it shrinks on. And you get awesome cables for free. And then if you want to do them, you just swap them out and do it again.
What happened to the days of buying a £10 HP keyboard that looked greasy as fuck?
Because they have membrane, you don't really want it. I don't want to diss on membrane keyboards, because I know, so our, all of our boss, Tim Clark, he very much likes a membrane keyboard. I've taken umbrage with that on multiple occasions, but he speaks for the silent minority of people who won't speak up that they really like membrane keyboards. And what I will say is, while I don't love a membrane keyboard, my favorite keyboard of all time, that literally the best I've used, I've had it for years and I absolutely love it, is a Topra, some people call them Topra Real Force, which is like a Japanese kind of keyboard. They're almost businessy. They don't look gaming at all. They're not really for gaming. But it's the best typing experience ever. And in some ways, you could say it's more a membrane than it is a mechanical. So, yeah. So just take that on, that not every membrane is dreadful.
Shout not out to all the membrane users. All
yeah, good on you. You can spill stuff all over them as well, and you don't have to worry about it. So if you're like drinking Monster Energy and you're like prone to spills, then cool.
Why Monster Energy?
All of us gamers drinking Monster Energy.
What gamers drink.
Just like in the good old days.
I don't have energy drinks, but I know people that drink like 2 or 3 a day. All right, but yeah.
In the year 2024, Jacob, there are people still drinking Monster Energy.
Yeah, I think there are. I get TikToks about people who drink loads of Monster Energy. Do you drink loads of Monster Energy?
I am a Monster Energy drinker. Not as a gamer, as a gym goer, I'm a Monster Energy drinker.
For the gym?
But not as a gamer. As a gamer, I'm a Coke Zero girly. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I drink a lot of water. I've swapped out one bad thing for another, you know. That's beside the point.
It's like I don't even know you. This is monstrous. Horrifying.
Well, yeah, I hope I haven't put both of you off from doing more custom keyboard things. With
You have encouraged us. We will be sending you the bill for both of our keyboards.
No.
That's a write-off. You write it off. It's for business, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's you can go down. It's like a well, isn't it? You kind of just end up down it, and then you're just spending
Stuck.
tons and tons of money, you're stuck. You never really get out of the custom keyboard thing. But once, I will say this, people often say they have their like end game, you know, they go, this is my keyboard now, I'm sticking with it, I spent too much money. And that's quite a nice thing, that the communities online, especially on like Reddit and Discord stuff, they will say, like, you'll see a lot of posts, people like, this is my end game, this is it, I've done it, I've
made
finished
it,
I'm out.
Yeah.
And I think at a certain point you just have to say, like, I've got this keyboard, I love it, it suits everything I want, and I made it my own, and I'm good. And if you can say that, you're better than like 90% of people in custom keyboard world, because most people just keep going.
Yeah, I do feel more equipped, I think, to enter into this daunting prospect. I may still make mistakes. I may wind up with keys that are the wrong shape. I know I'm going to do something wrong and forget to look at a particular line on a product listing, but, you know, we're here to learn.
I will say I've got bags of I actually have keycaps that were meant to go onto this custom keyboard I just built from the ground up, and that, which is a kit, by the way, so if anyone wants to do that, that's very easy because everything's included, you don't have to buy it yourself. So I am cheating on that, but I got some keycaps out for that, which I bought many years ago, and actually none of them fit. So, you know, you can keep making mistakes for ages, but one day I might get a keyboard that they fit on. So that's my excuse.
Beautiful. Well, Mollie, I guess we have homework now, the two of us, potentially, or at least, you know, to keep window shopping, and maybe eventually. I'm not going to come in with a Kirby keyboard at any point, even though I would love to torture you all with the horror of it. That would be beautiful. But I may figure out, you know, a nice, beautiful little aesthetic, thwacky sounding ASMR keyboard, and request some ASMR videos from Jacob for the PC Gamer TikTok. So
absolutely.
Thank you much, Jacob, for terrifying but also encouraging us with all of your keyboard knowledge.
You're welcome.
You can, of course, hit pcgamer.com to read the various things that Jacob has referenced, the things that he has written guides-wise, and like other stuff on the site related to custom keyboards and keycaps, and all of the rest of the coverage on the site, our usual news, reviews, guides, opinions, all of that at pcgamer.com. And as usual, you can talk with Mollie and I about this week's episode at forums.pcgamer.com. So thank you much, Jacob and Mollie. We'll see you guys.
Thanks so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.